Hello facilitators, my name is Malia Josephine and I've been a professional facilitator for 7 years. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 6 cons to freelance facilitation. I was a freelance facilitator for 2 years and I have a whole video on my journey of facilitation if you want to listen to it. In this video I'm just going to break down what were some of the really challenging aspects of freelance facilitation. Okay, so let's start with number 1. That's going to be that it was financially hard. Now, I would not have been able to do freelancing if I didn't have a savings in the beginning. And, my freelancing, which I think is a really common story, started during the pandemic. I lost a dream job with a facilitation agency and I was flailing my arms. What do I do? What do I do? And I think a lot of people, I decided to do freelancing, and I was applying for jobs at the same time, but the market was horrible at that time. So I just decided I'm not going to, waste all of my time applying for jobs. I'm just going to stick to this freelancing stuff. And I had already, I had saved up a good enough amount of funds from my previous job to be able to embark on this very uncertain and chaotic journey. So over the course of my 2 years, I have had most of my client work has lasted maybe about 1 to 2 months. I did have, 1 to 2 to 3 months. I did have 2 clients that lasted many months, but the work was very minimal. And I think, the biggest challenge for me around this freelance facilitation was that partly because of my youth, because I'm literally in my 20s, I just don't have a big enough kind of network of previous employers to tap into, to ask about if they need services. I think it is objectively more difficult if you are young to do freelance facilitation than if you are older and have decades and decades of pre-existing business relations to offer your facilitation services with. So I was basically trying to find clients just out of the blue, right? Just in the ocean, and that's just not the way that the facilitation industry works. The way that it works is that gigs travel through word of mouth networks, and employers, if they're looking for a facilitator, they tend to ask people who they already have really strong connections with. And a part of that is because facilitation is very intimate work, and you want to do it with someone who you trust. So that was my experience, is that I was not able to bring in a sustainable enough income to keep doing freelancing. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I'm sure, I thought a lot about, should I just keep doing it? I know over time, it is true that success compounds over time. There's a saying, maybe it'll have legs, and that's meaning you have a client, you do work, and then a couple months down the line they need more work. I think that's absolutely true, but for me I was not able. For me, it wasn't worth it. For me, it was I don't know how long it's going to take to reach that level of success, and I want to focus mainly on doing this facilitation work instead of trying so hard to find clients, which I guess leads me to a con number 2, which is that basically I did not like applying for jobs over and over and over again. Applying for jobs or in freelancing, a gig, is totally exhausting for me, because it's just I put my all into applications. I research the company. I really try and understand what their needs are. I really try and I have templates, and I've written plenty of previous cover letters, and I was building up my templates of proposals, RFP response proposals, but it is a huge time suck, and it's a lot easier if you're working for, a large consulting firm that has all of these pre-existing gig responses that you can pull out and then tweak a little bit. Well, for me, it's like I'm starting from pretty much scratch. And I also just I didn't like applying for jobs over and over again. Like, it's exhausting. I just wanted to apply for a job and to just get it and work for long terms. And I think that's possible, like, once you've developed your freelance facilitation work enough. But for me, as a newbie, that was not possible. So I guess number 3 for something that was hard about it, and I already spoke to this, is just that it's hard if you're young. I think there's a lot of reasons why it's hard if you're young. I think a part of that is that pre-existing network, but I think a part of it's also imposter syndrome, just feeling like, oh my God, am I really, expert enough to be offering these services? Do I really have enough experience to be marketing this and trying to, charge a lot of money for this? What do I even charge? I mean, I did get mentorship around that, but I imagine that it would be a little easier to ask for more money if you're like in your 50s or 60s and you have decades and decades of experience. While for me, as like, in my late 20s, I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe this much, is that okay? That I do think it just takes a lot of courage to talk with your clients about what you're offering and how much you're charging. So that kind of leads me, oh God, I totally lost count, guys. Oh, because I have a list and then I didn't do like the list in order. So whatever it is, number blank, insert number here, that's going to be, it felt like there were a lot of times that I was navigating very challenging dynamics where I felt like I was being taken advantage of, and I just didn't know what to do. And it wasn't like overwhelming, but it happened. There was just enough times that I was like, wow, this is so challenging. And what I mean by that is, facilitation is one of those services where it's not like there's a clear deliverable and you know how long it's going to take to complete that deliverable. That's not facilitation at all. They're like, and I mean, in a lot of consulting work, it's not like that at all, right? They're like, oh, I want to do a strategic plan, or, I want you to like design this facilitation guide for this event. And they tell you some details, but then you realize, like, as you get to know, and then you give them a quote, right? So I would give them a quote, or I would be like, oh, this is, how long I think it's going to take. But then you realize, like, oh my God, this is way more complex than the client communicated to me or realized. And now I've given them a quote, and now I have to adjust that quote. And I was able to do that, but it just was difficult. It was difficult. And it was also difficult for me, like in the beginning of certain clients, I would be like, oh, I charge this much an hour. And because I was just starting, I was like, hey, I am intentionally starting below market rate because I just started out with freelance facilitation and I want to build up my client base. And so I started with a client. I started way below my market rate. I only was charging, this wasn't really like facilitation work. It was like I was helping with adjunct facilitation services, but I charged $30 an hour. And over the months, I just realized, like, wow, I really cut myself short there. Like, as I worked with more and more clients, I started charging $50 an hour, then I started charging $80 an hour, then I started charging $100 an hour. And then it was like, man, like, I have this client and I've locked her in to a $30 an hour thing, and it's so hard to change it. And I know it's possible. I know I could have just said something, but it's not easy, okay, y'all? It wasn't easy. And so it just gave me a lot of like, honestly, respect and gratitude for all of those organizations and consulting firms that have these like amazing infrastructure that really supports their employees with doing facilitation work and getting valued with the right financial exchange and protecting their facilitators from kind of like unrealistic client expectations. So yeah, that was definitely something. I think another one, number whatever it's called, another con that was hard for me was just like the lack of teamwork, right? I was like an individual freelancer. I was working by myself. I did try and work with co-facilitators, but it just didn't work sometimes. People were busy or they didn't want to work on the project or whatever. And so I was working by myself, and I'm a facilitator. I like to collaborate with people and I like to work in a team. And that was definitely difficult for me over time. I did enjoy working by myself, but I knew in the long term that I was going to want to work for a team. So I think this is the last con. We're getting to the last con, and that was just kind of like the lack of structure. And it's funny because in the previous video that I made about the pros of freelance facilitation, I talk about how great it was to set my own schedule, but I also, there's another side to that coin, and that side is just like there was a complete lack of structure, right? Like there was no point where anyone was telling me this is what you need to do and this is when you need to do it, and this is how to prioritize things. No, like it was all on me. And so I think that, when I was working with a client, it actually was like a lot easier. Like I was able to like, oh, I know when to get the deliverables done. And like, I really wanted to help my clients. So that was, I was really good at time management when working with clients. But when it was like that in between time, when I wasn't working with clients and I was applying to like a bunch of gigs, it kind of felt like I'm in the void of time and I'm floating around, and I'm like, it just felt a little more difficult to know where to prioritize my time. And over time that got easier for me to understand, okay, I have this rhythm. I post a blog once a month. I do, I look for gigs every Monday and Tuesday. I work on my website on Fridays, or, I had that rhythm that I was getting into. But yeah, this is just a definite pro of having a jobby job, is that you just have that structure of, working with someone and them telling you, you working on like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get it done? And so, yeah, those are some of the challenges of freelance facilitation. I do not regret being a freelance facilitator at all. I absolutely would do it again at a different point in my career, because I think that there's just so much potential and there's so much excitement with freelance facilitation. You really can go so many directions, and that's what's kind of intoxicating about it, because you're just like, I could work with this client and do this project and like do all of these things. But I know for me right now, I'm really longing for that structure and that consistency and the reliability of working for a facilitation agency or organization. So yeah, that is my story. That's my experience. If you have any questions, comments, comment below. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck on your facilitation journey. See you later.